Hello, Lab Out Loud listeners. If you like the show, please consider supporting the show through our Patreon page. For as low as $1 a month, you can help support the show. Go to laboutloud.com/support to get started today. And now, on with today's show. You're listening to Lab Out Loud, Science for the Classroom and Beyond. And I'm your co-host, Dale Basler.
I'm Brian Bartel.
And today's topic is a little bit of a rant. And it's going to feel out of place because school's already started. But stick with me. This is the right time to be talking about school supply lists.
So before we jump into this, listeners,
Yeah.
I think it's important to note that obviously we're kind of in this new iteration of Lab Out Loud. It's just Dale and I. And at one point, a few years ago, we've kind of gone through this like, oh, do we want to continue the show? Do we not want to? Because, just like in teaching, you get to that hard year. And thankfully, we had enough wonderful guests and listeners that pushed us forward. But nonetheless, we still had conversations of like, what do we want to do next? And one of the options that Dale always came back to was, how about you and I just rant about stuff?
There's a little bit of that in this episode.
As parents, as teachers, like watching colleagues. And I mean, he's like, yeah, we can be like those two old guys in the Muppet Show and just kind of start ranting about everything. Sometimes we feel that way too, because we're just old.
Leave the jokes for the bears.
Exactly. So this is a good opening episode because it really is what we're talking about.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so my kids are done now. It's just like
you have college supply list. That's way worse, but at least I guess maybe that's
no. Their college supply list is not as bad because it's up to the user. They don't give you what I view as sometimes when done wrong.
Well, you haven't bought textbooks yet.
They bought textbooks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and yeah, they did that. And actually, my son at UW La Crosse, they rent the books and then they send them back. So it's a pretty great deal. I mean, yes, there are supplies for dorms and all that kind of stuff, but that's fun. That's different. That is like when you are a kid and you want to buy a notebook that has, Minecraft on or a puppy or something like that. I still think that's great. You want to do that kind of fun stuff.
You don't think college kids do that too? Like a Minecraft?
Yeah.
Minecraft notebooks?
They probably do. Roblox, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's fine. But when there's things on your supply list that every student needs for your classroom, I think it's time to think about, well, then shouldn't that be something that we pay for out of our budget? And I know the next thing is going to be, well, we don't have enough budget. I don't have a budget for that. I don't have a budget for that. I don't have a budget for that. But so let me start over. So I had taught physical science, physics. Physical science, every year, goggles. We need chemical splash goggles. And I'm telling kids of all walks of life and backgrounds that they need to go find chemical splash goggles. And their parents got to make a special stop because they couldn't find them at the same store where they were buying pencils.
Or they get the wrong ones with the perforations and they Sharpie them up and then they just wasted all this plastic on the wrong kind.
Exactly. They definitely had that. They got the wrong, even though you tell them they got the wrong kind, they would come with safety goggles. They would come with holes in them. They would come with all these different kinds. And we try to emphasize like, hey, these safety goggles, you're going to use them you got to take 3 science classes. You're going to have them here and all that kind of stuff. You need it for class. Then why aren't we supplying it? And at one point, at least at my school, we did do that. We said, you know what? We can buy these suckers in bulk, faster, cheaper, and a lot easier on the parents, and have them there for the kids.
Did you charge like a lab fee for that or anything?
Sometimes they had the whole lab fee. My personal preference would not be to do that because we already have school fees. Like if there's a need for those kinds of things, if it's some sort of specialty thing, but that's another point. Science isn't a
before we go there, like
course.
This reminds me of like school lunches because there are students who, buying safety goggles is a heavy lift. And when you kind of like put everyone on the same playing field, you don't have these, like exotic goggles. I don't know if there are any, but like, I'm surprised we haven't seen like designer brand like Gucci goggles or something. But
Well, the closest we had is like ones that had color bands and stuff
Right,
like that.
right.
So there are always some kids that had some fancy ones.
but everyone's gets put on the same level playing field. It's almost like, if you grew up in a school where you had a FIAD outfit, like you had a uniform, some of that we could. I see some utility into that. But in any case,
Yeah.
just like school lunches that were paid for, everyone benefited from it, even if they could afford it. I think that there's some sense to that.
Well, it's just easier not to have to go deal with this if you can buy it in bulk and know it's there. And also, when you work at a job and there's special equipment required, and I know there's going to be somebody that says, well, actually, my brother-in-law did have to buy his own power drill. Sure. Okay. But when you work at a job that you're happy about and you would prefer, they're going to supply the safety glasses. They're going to supply the
safety
things
boots.
you need. Yes, they're going to or reimburse you for the things that you need. A good employer is going to do that because they believe in it and they know it's important and they don't want anybody to cut corners, especially on something like safety. So that's my first thing. And then here's the other thing that really gets my goat is we have school districts. You're right. This is definitely turning into the Muppets rant. But we have plenty and plenty of schools that give kids an iPad or a MacBook or a Chromebook and, at least like $300 device that they say is essential for learning. So we can hand them a device that they can keep for an entire year or whatever, but we can't pony up for school supplies that everybody needs.
Well, I
that
think
drives me nuts.
Right. And when we see, I want to say not all school supplies, or let's say not all the requests on a school supply list are created equal. Maybe we need to go back there. So
Yes.
that's, getting your own pencils. Okay. I can see some of that. I can see some of the notebooks that are personalized. Like this is what the student's using. But when we get to things like tissue paper and sometimes toilet paper, things that are like we would consider hygiene.
I haven't. Have you seen a list with toilet paper yet? Because that was always my rant is like every list says you must have, X amount of boxes of tissue paper. Well, and I'm like,
yeah, I don't know if I saw toilet paper, but maybe that was an exaggeration.
We're not asking kids to bring in light bulbs.
Clorox wipes.
Clorox wipes is another thing. Like bring in school supplies. What next? Like Drano?
We need some roofing tar.
Yeah, I mean, that's tissue paper is to me on the same line as toilet paper. So I think why is that? That's a health thing. Why are we not just providing tissue paper? When I started teaching, we had tissue paper provided. We also work in a city that was surrounded by paper mills. I don't know if that was a factor, but that went away. And so now we're having kids bring in tissue boxes all the time. I don't understand what the point of that is.
That is a tricky one.
The Clorox wipes and certain wipes and in brand names and all those kinds of cleaning supplies. Why are we bringing in cleaning supplies? We're not asking the kids to clean things.
Oh, are we though? Maybe that's my children's own list this year says they need to bring in a small bottle of dishwashing soap for chemistry. And I'm thinking there's a couple things wrong with that. But one of those is like we have a small bottle for each student. Think about the plastic waste for every student bringing that in.
Thing what's wrong with a giant bottle and beakers that they clean? What do they need that for? I don't understand that. Now there could be. I'm sure that I'd love to hear
maybe it's
feedback.
for a lab that I don't know about, and I'll grant that. I'll grant some grace here. I don't want to get on my high horse too much without understanding, but
when you get a list that is like a page long and it's like 48 number 2 Ticonderoga sharpened pencils. Okay, if your whole school insists that the pencils should be number 2 Ticonderoga, then go buy Ticonderoga pencils in bulk. It's a pencil, for crying out loud.
Can't you see like there's some Ticonderoga lobbyists like coming up to the school saying, "I think you want us on your list."
Yeah. A deck of playing cards is on one of the school lists. A deck of playing cards?
Well, where does a list get to be what's like a standard supply list and what's extravagant? I guess maybe that's the piece. You did this a few years ago when your kids went into middle school. You actually I use this because it's a great tool for just like learning Excel, for instance. But you put out all of the requests that were on there, and then their current price on Amazon, just market value, and then
Target. I think I did Target.
Well, okay,
I can't remember.
Whatever the case may be. But one child was over $100, and this was 7 years ago, for instance.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
And then the funny thing is that you see some of that, and like one of the requests was a USB drive, and I know some of you are like, USB drive, but that was a requirement at one point, and you were so upset because they never used it that year. Here's the biggest ticket item on the list, and they didn't use it at all.
Well, it was at the time. Now they're not as expensive.
Well, that's the irony is that and granted, they were just kind of on the cusp of like getting Google Drive, and so that wasn't needed as much, but it was an expense that wasn't needed.
Yeah, I think if every kid needs it, and it's not a personalized thing, so like obviously gym shoes, if your school's not doing a uniform and such, you need gym shoes because that's personalized to your feet and your size and all that kind of stuff. But if it's something like paper and pencils, if it's lab goggles, if it's that dish soap, that if it's a thing that I did, this is a high crime for me too, because in retrospect, I wish I wouldn't have done it, because I had my students, I would have them whiteboard, I had these whiteboards and they'd work out problems and discuss how they came up with the answer, and we'd present that and ask questions. And it was part of my teaching methodology. And I asked the kids to bring in dry erase markers. Now, in retrospect, that's kind of dumb, because I can buy dry erase markers. First of all, it was part of the class. I needed it for teaching. I was deciding it was part of the lesson plan. So I could buy dry erase markers in bulk. I could watch for an entire year for deals on them and buy them. Why add that to the list if it's unique? I think there should be some consideration about these lists, and ask yourself, is this growing into the wish list? And I'm not alone. I've definitely heard parents like, this is crazy, like,
oh yeah,
like all these things in here, and why. I mean, I've been at Target where they're like, why does it have to be name brand? Does it really have to be name brand? And sometimes it does, because those dry erase markers that are knockoffs don't last, and we know that.
Right.
But that's just the consideration.
It's not Ticonderoga. It may not sharpen well.
Yeah, that's a consideration I think needs to be made. And this is the reason I was saying earlier that it seems like this is the wrong time to be talking about it. But no, it isn't. I think now is the time to be sitting down and saying, okay, as I go out through this year, what are the things that, yes, are part of this class? Like, we don't ask kids to buy beakers. Yet. I hope.
Yet.
Yeah. What is part of the class, and putting that list together, and then being able to, one, watch for, the best economic purchases of them. And then two, to bring those costs to whoever provides funding for your school, to your administrator, and say, hey, this is what we need. And if we bought this in bulk, we could save money. We could have consistency. We wouldn't have discrepancies for kids that don't bring them. You don't have that case where I had lab goggles and it's like, okay, who never got their goggles? Well, you can borrow, the poor misfit goggles from, that were that you don't have that, all that kind of stigma, and kind of go from there. And yes, are you going to have obstacles where you're going to be like, we still never got the funding for it? For sure. But I think you should still maintain that list and keep hitting it year after year and saying, these are things that we should provide for students.
Well, I think, okay, so let's back up a second, because I think you're a little hard on yourself, because you putting dry erase markers on, and I know you're saying I would do it differently now, but I think that's fair to say when you were doing it, it was a novel experiment. It was like, we're trying it out. This is, okay, I just need some assistance. And once it became routine, then that I feel like needs to translate into, I need to figure out a way to make this fit into my budget. And I think that's where you cross that line. And that's perhaps the difference.
Well, I think I look back at myself, I didn't bat an eye on putting it as a course requirement. And that is the stuff. That's the part. In retrospect, I'm mad at myself for saying, hey, you should have some considerations about what you're requiring kids to purchase and think about that. And I guess I just didn't think about that. And I was like, oh, yeah, we'll just make the kids buy it, you know?
Well, at least you didn't have something like offering extra credit to bring in items that were needed for the course. Because I've seen that before. And that like there's a pit forming in my stomach even as we speak about kids who can literally buy their grades with extra stuff that anyway.
I would say if we could first, number one, schools must provide tissues. Fact. If a kid's got a runny nose and they're a tissue hog or something like that, and like they need their own tissue or something like, yeah, bring your own. Sure. That's fine. But the fact that we're stocking schools with tissue paper based on each kid bringing in their 2 to 3 boxes of tissue in elementary school, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
I'd like to get to a point where I understand. I'm going to hear people saying, yeah, but we don't have the money for that. Or if we use it this way, then we have less supplies for lab chemicals that we need, or glassware, or other things that we really need. And I do understand that. I think that this is a fight that needs to be taken back to maybe the community, maybe the administration, to say these are things that are important, and we've kind of become too comfortable with asking families to do that. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, because and the other thing is, when we do that, we hide the actual cost of education. So I went to Germany over the summer. They pay, and I'm not saying Germany does things right, because there's things that annoyed me there, but they do pay a lot of taxes.
That's for a different rant show.
Yeah, they pay a lot of taxes, but they get a lot of services. The thing that we sometimes do is we nickel and dime the fee. We got a little school fee here, we got a little thing here. Now you signed up for a class, you did this. Now you got to pay for this, you can pay for that, and we are hiding the actual cost of education. If a science class actually must function with goggles, then that's a cost of education.
Correct.
We shouldn't be shoving it under the carpet of school supply lists. We should show what the actual cost is for those kinds of things, instead of kind of dumping it on the parents who can afford it, who have time to do it, and those kinds of things. Plus, there's this whole school supply industrial complex. There's this whole as soon as 4th of July is done, here comes school supply ads. And it's yeah. And it's like all this kind of hoopla around going back to school shopping is an event. And sure, so it is.
What do you think about alternative funding? And I think about so science organizations may have some kind of grants that they could apply for, or communities that have some kind of offset for supplies. And you could, let's say you're doing a novel project, let's say whiteboarding is a new thing that you want to try, and applying for a grant to cover some of those costs. What do you think about that then? Does that diminish the cost of education, as you said?
No, I think that's a good thing if you are experimenting with something. So if you are trying a new
new technique.
For example, had a new lab that I wanted to try, which was doing this Dropbox kind of thing, and wrote a grant to get funding for it. If that's the case where I get it and I can use it year after year, the same thing, I think that's good. That's fine. If it's something that I do and I'm putting consumables into a grant every year, that doesn't make sense to me, because now you need it every year. If I'm putting consumables in for the first year because I want to see if this is actually a fruitful choice, that's a little different.
Well, and I asked this question because you and I both work we're on a foundation committee for our science organization in the state, and we've been increasingly getting requests for things that we would consider as, I guess, basic science equipment. So we need money for microscopes, and it breaks my heart to think that a school district would say, we need this class, but you have to apply for grants to get basic equipment for it. And it's like, hey, we're going to have a swim team, but you got to find the pool.
Well, when it comes down to it, it makes it sound like this is some sort of extra special class, but it's not. Science is a required core class. You're not taking some class that not everybody takes. Like my physical science class, now they don't have that class, but that freshman
They
science
still
class,
have it. They just don't have it first.
different, yeah. That the freshman science class, everybody's taking the class. Everybody needs these credits of science. It's not an extra thing.
It's not a luxury course.
It's not like
it's
I
not
signed
elective,
up
I guess is
for
what you'd
some
say.
elective course at the YMCA and I need to supply, like beads for bead making. No offense to that art project. That's what it is.
Well,
it's
but
not
even elective science courses, like there's an ecology course. I'm looking at the supply list, and it literally says in the supply list, make sure you have shoes that you can go outside with. And I'm like, well, that's a good thing to think about.
Yeah. I mean, I could see, an argument to be made for elective classes. So you have your science electives. That might be a case where, okay, these courses are a little bit different. They have some unique things. I could see that case. But if we can start with the core things, core classes, elementary school, everybody's got, hopefully, science taught. They have these things that has to be there. We're not asking parents to buy what is expected in a lesson plan. That kind of stuff. Same thing in science. I truly believe that we should provide goggles. If we can provide a Chromebook, we should definitely be able to provide a pair of lab goggles.
Well, actually, that brings a good question because I'm thinking of calculators right now. There's a couple things that bother me about calculators. Number one, like there's a price point that's settled into graphing calculators, and it's always been over $100. It feels like. For the last 2 decades, I don't think it's dropped below $100. And that's got to be a lot cheaper I can get t-shirts way cheaper than 20 years ago. I should be able to get graphing calculators for a fraction of the cost that we pay for them now. They haven't significantly changed. There's been some updates. There's been, you can get rechargeable batteries. They run in USB. I have graphing calculators where I can plug probes into. So I get some of that. But
I know they haven't changed because my mother-in-law has been retired from math teaching for years, and my kids use some of the calculators that she still had. I have a TI-83 Plus sitting here, and I know one of my kids used that.
I just had a TI-84 that died. I was so sad. I taped in like my pocket periodic table and everything. It was just like aww.
Yeah, there's.
Okay, but thinking about calculators, because I do see a supply list out here, and we're not going to call out anyone, but I like that they put out that one of the classes you need a camera, and it says cell phone is acceptable or school-provided computer. So they do have some alternatives, and I kind of like that. But then why do you need a calculator? So why couldn't you use your cell phone acceptable for a calculator? And I
don't understand that.
I get obviously there are some issues. Like I still think like, hey, let's train kids more to say, when you're in class and you want to use this, let's put on airplane mode. Let's do this. If you're not uploading things, that kind of stuff. I think we need to do a better job about teaching kids. This needs to be a big piece here. And we felt this for years, Dale, and I know it's not perfect, but I feel like we need to do a much, much better job about training our kids how to use these devices when they're
already have
a professional setting.
Yes. Oh, yes. The devices they already have, and then use them in a professional setting. And you can be honest to kids and say, hey, you know what? We all turn to our phone to do something for our job, and then all of a sudden get distracted by something else. And that's something we have to combat. And here's some strategies for that, especially for our older kids,
right?
Because we're kidding ourselves. If our solution to cell phone misuse is to buy a calculator instead. we still didn't address the cell phone misuse issue, which can't just be done by parents.
Correct.
It has to be reinforced everywhere. Because
hey, did your college kids? They have like when they go into class? Is there like a slotted like hanging poster that they can put their cell phones in when they come in?
No.
I knew the answer to that.
Thousands of dollars of cell phones hanging in a little shoe cubby to hide your cell phone. I was never comfortable taking a kid's phone.
That's almost $1,000 or more than $1,000 right there.
One of our colleagues would say, hey, would you like to charge it up here? And she has a charging station. And I thought that's an excellent way to go. Because
trick 'em.
That's saying, bring your phone up here to get it charged, which they, ABC always be charging.
That's right. That's
but it's
actually a
also
novel idea. But
a way
that's
to address it.
that's student agency choice and saying, yes, I will do this.
Well, it's a nudge too, but
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's not taking it away. It's saying shifting it. It's just putting it in there. I want to talk about adults doing it with cell phones. I don't know how we got on cell phones because of calculators. Yeah,
Because of calculators and cameras and other
when
things that could be, I guess, replaced in the classroom from a school supply list.
Adults are not. Kids, it's a challenge because they're developing minds. I agree, but adults don't get off the hook for cell phone abuse. When I went to Europe this summer, and we were in London, and it's the equivalent of it's the horse brigade, the ones that the horses that lead the queen, and that kind of stuff. The horse is standing at its station, and all these tourists are around, and this woman. My wife saw it. I didn't see it. This woman was on her cell phone and walked right into the horse.
Oh!
Just boom.
Woman versus horse. I'm assuming the woman lost.
Yeah. 'Cause, your life's got to be pretty great. There had to be some amazing TikTok video to run into a horse. But nevertheless, okay, school supply lists. So thinking about it now,
we want to hear.
Is a good.
We want to hear from you.
Yeah,
What
I'm
kind of
sure
outrageous things have you had on school supply lists before? What things, have you found solutions that, we're, raising the teacher credit to $300 off on our taxes is not going to fix it either. We know that. You can deduct this extra $50.
That's another thing that hides the cost of education.
Right. So I think
making the teacher buy it all.
And that's I am a teacher. I live with a teacher as well. And there's this time of year, there's a lot of pieces in our grocery cart that aren't directly for our family.
So I think my final point on this, because it's been a thing that's been bugging me for a long time, is that yes, you probably won't have the funding to get what you need. And yes, you may still need to put it on your list. But don't give up asking for it and drawing attention to the true cost of your science class.
I've also seen leaders who are in charge of budgeting. Their initial reaction is always no. And then they watch to see, well, are they going to figure it out on their own?
Yeah.
Because it's a lot easier to wait and see for a lot of these things. And so that's not all the case. I know some leaders who are wonderful too, so don't get me wrong. But I think it's easier to say no initially without, and see what happens. Like, will you go look for a grant, or will you buy it on your own, or will you just put it on the school supply list?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here. If we are looking for a couple things, if there are science teachers out there that have thoughts on school supply lists or want to talk to us about other issues, you can reach out to us at laboutloud.com/contacts. And of course, this show cannot survive without the support of its listeners. You can support the show with as simple as $1 a day at our $1 a day. Well, if you want to, as low as $1 a month by contributing to our Patreon, and you can find links to that information also at laboutloud.com/support. Thanks again for listening to Lab Out Loud. It's been a pleasure.
Bye now.